In this video, I react to a video by a YouTuber, Joma Tech, where he explains how he spends his $250,000 salary. I think he's a app engineer, data scientist, and no, I won't be doing a live reaction because I think it's more important to just kind of talk about it. He kind of does a lot of rambling at first, so I think it's best to just get to the point. So basically, like, he does this spreadsheet thing and he basically breaks down his categories of spending. In the last month, he spent more than he ever did, which was $19,000. I mean, think about that. With $19,000, you're basically spending almost $220,000 a year in just spending. Now, of course, he prefaces this, and this is what I like. He prefaces this because I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of spending, by saying, listen, I highly encourage anyone watching to be financially responsible. Don't reckless spend. And my net worth is still growing despite how much I'm spending. Now, I respect that because he's saying, okay, it may look like a lot to you, but I'm making so much more that I can account for that. I really think that personal finance and financial literacy is very important. And one of the first principles is to spend below your means. And just because he's spending a lot may still mean that he's, earning a lot back from that. He seems to be a very big YouTuber with 1 million subscribers, so maybe that's how he's making a lot more money. So just, remember that everything is relative. For you or me, since we're making a lot less, it's still very much wise to be spending way below our means. Our numbers are going to be different from his. So let's just get into it. He also talks about how it's very much an entertainment video and to not copy what he does and spend responsibly. And I respected that. And then he dropped his numbers. And definitely not judging him. I definitely wish him really well. And congrats for his success. But I think it's just be fun to talk about some of his things that he spends on. So one of his big categories of spending was entertainment. He spent about $4,000 on mostly concert tickets. He bought him and a couple family members tickets to see Hamilton. He bought a few other family members tickets to spend to watch Trevor Noah. Actually, I think it was Friends. And then he also went to see Ali Wong, another comedian. And then he went ahead and bought some K-pop tickets to some type of big K-pop concert festival. So wow, that's a lot of spending on concerts. And he, when he went to review his spending, and this guy's very detail oriented, he did like a whole pivot table. So he checked everything. One of his conclusions was, this is not something that I would change. This is a necessary thing that I think is worth the money. So I think that's very fascinating to me, and it's definitely worth noting how people are different. As a business-minded person, I can't help but to think of it from a business angle. Although you and I would never consider spending that much money for, just comedians, when you could probably watch it for free on YouTube, watch their, Netflix show or special, or, even some of these comedians like Ali Wong. Like, I know that she's basically done college tours where you can basically just join the college or attend for free, even if you're not a college member, because she does do those like free shows, or even if you're an alumni. So I definitely know Ali. You could have probably seen Ali Wong for free or free-ish, maybe paid $10 at some point, but I guess she's blown up a bit. But the point being, even if you and I would not spend that much, there are people out there who would, just because they're at a different baseline in their life or stage in life. So I think that's very much important to understand. And it matters when you are pricing your products if you ever start a business. I think that's the reason why a lot of products may seem like crazy. Like, who would spend thousands of dollars on this phone or hundreds of dollars on this course or program? There's some online courses that sell for thousands of dollars. I mean, you have Brendan Burchard, you have Ramit Sethi, you have all these people selling these thousands of dollars courses. Who is buying these things? People who have that money, where to them, in percentage-wise, it's not a big spender. By the way, I do have a couple online courses myself, but they're very cheap in comparison. I wanted to make them affordable since I know a lot of my audience are young high school students. So my courses are not $1,000, not even $500. They're in the double-digit price range. So if you go to my website under the resources section, you can check them out, and they can really help up-level your performance in life, your productivity, your goal setting, how you deal with procrastination, and how you build habits, which can up-level your earning power, how you do in school, and so forth. So I think it's an investment that will pay for itself over time. And I chose to go the route, at least for now, maybe I'll raise my prices a lot as well one day, but at least for now, limited time offer, check them out. Anyhow, back to the video. He also mentioned how he basically spends nothing on self-improvement. He had a self-improvement category, but it was minuscule. And he kind of admits jokingly that he doesn't spend much on self-improvement. He only purchased like a couple very cheap coaching sessions, I think, for fitness. And I think that's another thing that's really worth exploring. You would think someone who's on paper very successful would invest more in self-development, because you have other people who, like, I'm going to be honest, I do not make nearly even close to what he makes. And you would argue, I've been spending a lot of time on self-development, and a lot of successful people do as well. That's kind of incongruent, right? He's not doing any, and he's so successful. Well, I would argue that, well, let's just wait and see. Time will tell. Maybe in the first 5 to 10 years, that's not going to be a big issue. You got a nice, cushy job as a software engineer. But since I'm, reading all these books, a book a week, really investing in masterclass.com, all these other things, podcasts, audiobooks, I think the tortoise versus the hare will win the race in the long run. So catch me in 20, 30, 40 years, and we'll see what happens. So that being said, all the more power to him. I think everyone has their own choices in life, and I'm definitely not guilting him or shaming him in any way. I definitely think if you don't want to do that, that's totally up to you. I mean, I applaud him for at least even in creating a self-improvement category. For a lot of people, that's not even on their agenda or their budgeting. So very good, entertaining to say the least. And then we go on to another huge expense. So he lives in San Francisco, and he found out that he spends $1,000 a month on Uber. I mean, that is a lot. On one hand, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's probably a very busy, traffic-ridden city, and you want to get around and you don't want to buy a car. But then even he admits, man, I should just buy a Tesla and save money. So obviously $1,000 a month on just transportation is a lot. And so he should definitely cut that down, whether that's buying a car even, maybe that's $25,000, $50,000 up front. But once you average that out for the lifetime of the vehicle, at least 3 to 5 years of driving it, that really leads to something much more economical. So really goes to show you that although convenient, it seemed at the time that Uber was this, much more affordable option. Depending on your situation, it could really wreck your budget. So very interesting observation there. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on to other expenses. His next big expense that he talked about was his expense on, I think it was, he spent a lot on food. He spent $1,000 on restaurants, and he basically admitted that he doesn't ever cook at home. He always eats out, and that he just loves it, and that's just how he prefers living. I think one pattern I've noticed with a lot of these principles, because I can relate to them to a degree, is the issue that they also create a element of kind of the young bachelor life, where you never choose to develop traits that could really shape you as a not only attractive person, but also just a self-functioning, like fully functioning adult is one of those situations where you earn a lot of money in a job and then you lean and rely on that to kind of succeed. That's something that I've noticed in others and in myself, and really sought out to develop, because even if you don't, it's not even just something that a lot of money causes. Even if you don't have a lot of money, you can definitely still rely on things just because you want to rely on them, like eating a lot of fast food rather than cooking, or any of those bad habits. And so obviously certain things like money can magnify these problems, or at least just keep them in your comfort zone. And so I always recommend anyone to really just try and improve their ability to be self-sufficient. I know like people don't like cooking, people don't like cleaning. He also pays for a housemaid. And these could be really good investments, especially if you have money to burn. But it also speaks to the whole point of the whole personal finance, saying that as your income increases, your spending increases, and then you get used to the spending and you can never go down. That's something you have to be aware about. He pays for a virtual assistant, which I think is a very good business investment. But he also pays for maid services and all this food that he eats out. What if he started to learn to cook himself just a little bit, maybe just one night a week? He cooks it. All the other meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you can eat out. But just start with the tiny habits, atomic habits philosophy of just once a week, cook something nice. What this will ultimately lead to, I think, is a snowball effect where you're starting to cook much healthier. This is the practice I used to really start to cook a lot more and eat healthier during quarantine after years of trying to eat healthier and cook better. It'll affect your brain performance. It'll affect your physique. It'll affect how well you do. I mean, I tested it out. I've been eating a lot more plant-based. I still eat some meat, and I think I always will. But I've been eating more plant-based and then testing that out with eating like fast food or eating a lot of meat or eating fried chicken before going to my CrossFit classes. And CrossFit has very intense, high-intensity interval training workouts that really get you gasping for air and laying on your back after it. So I could sense a perceivable difference when I was eating a lot of plant-based stuff versus a lot of junk food or meat. It was like night and day. And maybe that was just anecdotal, but I'm going to keep testing it out because I am not completely sure, but there's been a few sessions now where there was a noticeable difference in my performance and how I felt before and during the workouts. So I think it just rounds you out as a person. I think in terms of like really mastering numerous areas of your life, you want to be physically healthy as well, not just with the size and strength of your muscles, but cardiovascularly healthy, flexible, and so forth. And so that's something that you really got to invest in. You can't just be eating out all the time and relying on everyone else to do your work. It reminds me of a story I heard from a podcast, the Mating Grounds podcast. And essentially the story went something along the lines of how this guy, this was back in the 80s, one of the hosts of the podcast roomed with this guy back in the 80s. He was making like $250,000, what this YouTuber makes now, back in the 80s. So inflation adjusted, I mean, he was killing it. However, he was cutting it to such an extreme where he was living, sleeping on a futon in this like raggedy apartment because he was basically an extremist and saving money. Of course, his quality of life was terrible, and although he was cutting back a lot, it was terrible. He couldn't get any dates. He looked atrocious. His hygiene, his fashion was terrible. And, his basic goal was to retire in 10 years and live on a beach. And then he would have been able to turn his life around. Maybe his spending would have gone up. But the host basically painted him to be a tragic situation where just because you have a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean it amounts to anything. I would venture to say that because he didn't start to hone and develop his other skill sets, his social skills, his hygiene, his fashion, his general ability to spend and present himself well and buy furniture and stuff that looks well, I feel like he's probably still not doing so well, despite that. His dream was, oh, once I become a millionaire and save up enough, like everything will just, you know, fall through. And that doesn't always happen, as you can see. And, it just doesn't work out. So I bring that up because, there's two ends of the extreme. You'll have this one guy, he's spending a lot every month with a high income job. You have the other guy, same amount of money, maybe even made more money, spending nothing. Clearly very financially literate, but maybe don't understand some of the nuances to kind of that literacy where you should be spending a bit more. There's a quote by Warren Buffett. He said this during a very old shareholder meeting. And he was basically asked a question on extreme levels of frugality. And he said, I don't agree with it. I don't think that's a good approach. And he basically had this analogy. He said, you don't want to be sacrificing a trip to Disneyland with your children so that 50 years later, that would have compounded in your retirement account to be, 30 more feet on your yacht. I mean, really, the end goal is not always just to have some higher dollar amount or now or later or wherever. It's really, what does that dollar amount equate to? Sometimes that present value is more worth it. Not always, but usually. I mean, you either have one end extreme, the guy's overspending or the guy's cutting back too much. Usually it's the overspending. Now, another category that this YouTuber talked about was his spending on basically other forms of entertainment. He had the Hulu subscriptions, the Spotify subscriptions, and stuff like that. And those to him were all essential things. And I think, given his current situation, he got this job as this engineer, this programmer that he likes, he enjoys. What's the big deal? I think the one caveat to that is I got the sense, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I got the sense that he was very young. Once you equate those things as essentials, especially, this is a curse of getting a lot of money early on, you really have a hard time getting rid of them if anything were to come up. Let's say a tragedy occurs and he gets let go from his job, or he really just starts hating his work and he doesn't want to ever do it again. And then he has to make a uncomfortable transition to maybe another field or profession that pays a lot less, but he's happier with. If, and these situations aren't out of the realm of possibility, they happen all the time, then he will have a hard time adjusting downwards and cutting things that he deems are essential services. So if you're spending, $20 on Pandora and then HBO and then Disney Plus and all this stuff, and you've never felt or been in a situation where you've lived without them and realized that they're non-essential, that's a huge problem for any high spender who really wants to master personal finance. So that's something that I would highly recommend anyone to look out for, because it's a huge danger. And I think you can do it. Like, especially if you have that high income, you can start, you have that safety net, but you can definitely start practicing it. Maybe just cut out Hulu for the month just to feel like what it's like not to have it and realize, hey, I don't need this. And I can live without it if something big were to happen. Sometimes a loved one gets cancer and then you have these 6-7 figure medical bills and all of a sudden things don't look so pretty. You have to be able to account for the crap that life deals with you. So, I think he goes through a few other categories, but I basically covered the big ones. I mean, he did mention that he spent like a couple $1,000s on basically business equipment, like YouTube equipment, like video cameras and different like live stream boxes and stuff like that. And, you could argue that's a business expense. I think... and he also bought some guitars and musical instruments. I think my first personal philosophy is, there should be a pie chart, a percentage amount to guilt-free spending. This is through Ramit Sethi's personal finance model, but everyone should have that pie chart with guilt-free spending. And it should be around 30%, maybe 40% for some. Some might be 20%, some might be 50%, but It should be around that range. And when anything you spend in that, doesn't matter what anyone thinks. You can't, no one can judge you. And if for him, if that's concerts, thousands of dollars in concert tickets to comedians, personally something I would never do. I'm not a real big fan of that. I would rather spend it on like maybe a BTS concert, but I mean, I'm really picky. But no matter what it is, no one can fault you for it. No one can say it's a waste because it is a reasonable but not excessive portion of the income you're making. And then there should be other parts of that pie chart that are dedicated to saving your money and investing it for the future through 401ks, retirements, IRAs, and so forth, to grow it, or just your bank account for those times of kind of danger that might come up. But also, it's sometimes just good to have that week, that month, that year, where you just cut all those expenses. Even if you can spend a lot, just cut them all, because otherwise you just continue to, it's human nature. You just continue to spend more and more, and all this crap that you don't need, you start to assume is necessary, and you can't ever come down. And that's very dangerous. It leads to horrible situations like Mike Tyson and 50 Cent going bankrupt, even though they made millions. They just kept spending more than they had, even though they were making so much. And it can lead to very tragic situations like that. So I don't want that to happen to you. And I think it's also a great kind of a lesson for kind of the best of both worlds. You don't have to become an extreme minimalist and suffer and have this unpresentable life that's not appealing to other people, but also, kind of bad for you. I know some people choose to live that life. Mr. Money Mustache did, and they rationalize it as a way that they don't have any problems with. And if that's the case, I mean, more power to them. But sometimes it can cause unnecessary byproducts that really suck, like just coming across really bad or suffering a lot through it, or people just don't want to hang around you, or your family suffering because you make expense cuts to Disneyland or stuff that you probably shouldn't, because those are memories you'll never have again with your children. You don't have to go that extreme, but you also shouldn't be spending excessively. Obviously, there's that guilt-free spending that I mentioned that definitely plays into it, but also, especially if you get that a lot of money while you're still young, you have to be able to, look into the future and put some guardrails and put on some exercises to kind of tweak that. I definitely think this guy should consider how he can use Ramit Sethi's budget allocation principle to maybe devote more to kind of that investment. And maybe he already is, I don't know. He did mention that he was investing in Bitcoins and stuff. But, find some more safe investments and don't just spend all your money. Use some of it for some backup in case anything goes wrong. You should be saving some of it, and you have to kind of get used to that feeling of those non-essentials. Quite frankly, most of that stuff, if not all of it, can really be cut. And I think that's the level you need to get to really function at a peak level of happiness. You have that famous entrepreneur, Gary Vaynerchuk, who says he'd be perfectly fine living in like a crummy apartment and paying very little for it. And when you have that baseline, I mean, you're always going to be happy. You don't have these expectations of I need to live in this fancy apartment with this fancy, pool and a maid service to live a good life. And that can really kind of accelerate your success in many ways. One, you don't have those golden handcuffs where you're scared to move to a different role because the salary is going to be a drop, even though it could be a incredible learning and growth opportunity. And then two, you're not dependent on these unnecessary elements of excessive expenses to be happy. You have Dan Bilzerian, that Playboy millionaire, who suffers from the same thing. He said in many interviews that since he's so used to buying the most expensive stuff, anything below that he becomes unhappy for. And I wish he would watch this video, because that's something that, with the exercises I mentioned, can be reset. I'm not just pulling these out of my butt. This comes from The Science of Happiness, books like The Myths of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky. She's one of the top positive psychology researchers in the world. Her studies have been quoted thousands of times. And in her book, she recommends these periods of kind of resuming back to a lower level of living, to just kind of reset your baseline. Otherwise, it's human nature to keep climbing. And so, even some of the stuff he's mentioned as essential in his video, like $1,000, $2,000 a month on film and production equipment, that's definitely not necessary. Mr. Beast, one of the most subscribed YouTubers, he made most of his videos starting off with his phone. That's it. It's not really the equipment, it's how you do with it. Of course, the equipment adds fuel to the fire, but it's not necessary. Guess what I'm recording this with now? That's right, my iPhone. I actually have spent hundreds of dollars on video cameras and stuff, but over time I realized, hey, the camera quality, it's sometimes indistinguishable from a phone. So why am I wasting all this time? It's about the storytelling, the value of the video. So, just think about that. I definitely think 99% of the stuff, the concerts, the food, the entertainment, the transportation, a lot of it can be cut and he could still live a higher quality of life. So just food for thought. I think it was a very entertaining and informative video. Obviously, he's going to keep doing his own thing and choosing to spend his money how he will. Time will tell. Check back in 5-10 years how he's doing. Maybe it's working out. Maybe he realized he spent too much and he makes a video, kind of retracting what he said and wishing he saved more. Or maybe one of his Bitcoin or crypto investments do take off and it doesn't matter. Who really knows? Time will tell. I think the long-term tortoise approach that I have will do better in the long run. So that's it. I think I want to leave you with a final thought, which is that happiness does not always equate to the amount you're spending. There's a great book by, what's his name? Geoffrey Miller. It's called Spent. And the whole book is like his basic, I think it's a summation of his years and years of study on human psychology, marketing, the big 5 personality traits, and how they relate to advertising and human spending. And one of his big points is that a lot of the things we spend money on are unconscious or conscious signals to kind of prove to other people what our big 5 personality traits are. How extroverted we are, how conscientious we are, how open we are to new things. Whether that's a bumper sticker, the type of car you get, Kia versus, pickup truck versus SUV, they all unconsciously signal things about us. Things that we want to tell people, whether that's family, friends, neighbors, or lovers. And his big point is that most, if not all the time, the things you spend excessively on can be signaled for free without all this back and forth crazy stuff. And it doesn't relate to happiness. He has this whole list in the back of the book about stuff that made your ancestors happy. And he asks, do you do any of this stuff? And usually the answer is no. It's like stuff like, help someone elderly in your community. Give back your money or time to someone. Run in the grass and feel sun on you. Stuff that our ancestors had that we lost, that actually generated a lot of happiness that we don't now. So just think about it. Excessive spending, although a lot of Americans have this flawed advertisement that's going to be key to happiness, not necessarily the case. Now, don't think that I'm some happy-go-lucky guru who doesn't care about money. I mean, of course I do as well. I'm definitely on my career path and striving, but you got to keep in line certain basics while you're on that climb. Of course, we all want more money. Let's continue grinding towards that, but also passion, career, Passion in what you love. Passion in the simple and free things in life. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.